Okay, for you today, we are going to introduce our media unit with its critical lens, which is feminist literary theory. A lot of people have very divisive notions of feminism. Some people think that it's a way to empower and embolden women, and that is its intention. But there are some people who also think that it's a way to drag men down, and it just promotes a different type of inequality. The purpose of this is not to discuss whether or not feminism is a good or a bad lens to view this in. It's just a lens that we're going to put on. And for the purposes of media, since this is not so much a text, we're going to look at the way men and women are portrayed across some social media platforms and how that reinforces or subverts the patriarchy. So that is the purpose for our discussion this unit. So our big question for the unit that we are going to talk about is, what does the reception of YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok by the public and critics tell us about the operation of the patriarchy? How do these platforms serve to uphold or reject patriarchal ideals? And below this, there's going to be a video that discusses the patriarchy and how it kind of impacts all of our lives, and it does it much better than I can do it. And you probably only want to listen to me for so long. And if you hear a dog barking in the background, that is my dog at the moment. Apologies. So what is feminist literary theory? It basically looks at the way the texts we produce reinforce or undermine the historical oppression of women. And that oppression can be economic. So whether or not women can earn money and how much money they earn compared to men. It can be political, such as the right to vote. It can be social, such as the women's liberation movement and the birth control and abortion questions that came along with that. Or psychological, such as the feeling of safety that women have when they walk down the street at night. And all in all, it just wants to expose any sort of societal and cultural misogynistic views and the exclusion of female writers from literature. Or in this case, it is going to be expose misogyny within the social media posts that we create and watch. In order to understand feminist literary theory, you need to understand that feminism in general came in three waves. So the first wave was basically female writers and female thinkers pointing out that things weren't equal and that they could not do the same things that men did. And later on in the first wave, they came to promote women's suffrage, and then women got the right to vote. The second wave of feminism shifted to equality within the workplace. You will know that as the gender wage gap or the glass ceiling, where women tend to be able to promote themselves to a certain level and then things kind of stop. This also kind of dovetailed or went alongside with American civil rights movement, which, if you don't know, is basically the era of Rosa Parks and the bus and Martin Luther King and his I Have a Dream speech and the end of segregation. Other topics that came up during second wave feminism was the emergence of birth control. The topics of premarital sex came out and whether women should be doing that, and it became a little bit more mainstream. And then we get into third wave feminism, which is the early 90s to the present. And third wave feminism is basically female people of color wanted a voice in feminism. Previously, feminism had been centered on white middle class women, but now other voices and other genders on the gender spectrum wanted to be included in this as well. So feminism became a lot more inclusive. Common beliefs within feminist theory is that basically women are oppressed by patriarchy in any way that patriarchy can oppress a person. And wherever there is patriarchy, a woman is the other. And not only is she kind of marginalized, but she can also be treated as property in a way, depending on the society that you get into, and sometimes only looked at as not only as something different from men, but sometimes is blamed for the sins, I guess, of men. And feminism also believes that biology will determine like our sex that is assigned at birth, but culture is going to determine our gender. So whether that is whether you view gender as male, a binary male, female, or a spectrum that includes male at one end, female at the other end, and sort of all the types of transgendered and non-binary identities in the middle. And finally, that gender issues are going to play a role in almost any aspect of human production and experience, and that includes literature, whether we are consciously aware of these issues or not. And I would encourage you to think about your own life and think about how things that you do are gendered and you just don't even think about it. For example, as a woman, I tend to just automatically get ready before I go anywhere. Finally, questions to consider when we view texts with a feminist lens is we're going to take a look at how the relationship between men and women are portrayed and what are the power relationships between these men and women. Like, for example, is it the standard men and women have power, or is it subverting about those roles? How are those roles defined? This will be interesting for social media, in my opinion. What constitutes masculinity and femininity? And how do people embody these traits when they are essentially putting on a performance for other people? Are characters or popular personalities, do they take on traits from opposite genders? And how does this change our reaction to them? What does the work produced by women say about women's creativity? And what does the history of the work's reception by the public and critics tell us about the operation of patriarchy? That links to one part of our big question. And finally, what role does the work play in terms of women's literary history and literary tradition? Again, we are not reading any text, and everything we're studying in this unit is going to be very, very modern. So we will probably stay a bit further away from that because women's social media tradition, like that story is still being written. We don't know what that will be yet. And my sources were the Owl Purdue Writing Lab. It is actually a really good spot for any literary theory. So if you find the sources or the theories that we are using in class to be kind of insufficient and you're not a big fan, feel free to check this out.